Dr. Kearsley is my dad, Mike Kearsley. And as Steve said, I'm the veg mapping coordinator for the park. When I took the job, I didn't see this word in the job description. It sort of surprised me to find out that I was going to do very little vegetation mapping, that I was in fact going to be doing a lot of coordination. This project and the work I'll be describing is a result of work done by a lot of different groups. My dad told me early on that if I wanted to do a job right, the trick was to find people who are smarter than you are and hire them to do the work. And that's exactly what we've managed to do here. It's common, right? First group I want to mention is the National Park Service I&M program. They are funding the bulk of the work that you're going to see here today. They are creating a national program of vegetation maps for parks throughout the country, and they're the ones who fund most of this work. NAU has contributed as well in very important ways. Tina Ayers in the biology department has staff who did most of the sampling for the vegetation work. Most of the field work that was done by people from the biology department. They're also writing the descriptions for the vegetation types that we are finding in the canyon. And the Ecological Restoration Institute, Scott Kern at ERI, created a very handy, very portable electronic data collection solution for us, so that rather than having to handwrite all of our data sheets and hand enter them into the computer, they were entered in the field and could be pulled into a database very quickly. It's a very important and very useful job that they did. Cass Green Associates is, we hired them last year through a contract to do the actual mapping, to combine the fieldwork information with imagery and a bunch of other data to actually produce these maps. And Cass is a joy to work with. She's really bright, and she's made the right move by hiring a lot of local people with expertise. NatureServe is it's the for-profit arm of the Nature Conservancy. They were spun off a few years ago. They are writing the actual vegetation classification. This isn't just a veg mapping program. We're classifying all the vegetation in the park and then mapping the classes that we produce. NatureServe is doing that work. E2M did the initial field work. They produced the original draft of the work plan for the project and got things started early. So, as I said, I'm coordinating the work of a lot of these people, and it's been a joy to work with this project. So let's move on. I'm sort of surprised to see this many people here. Vegetation mapping. You're either friends here to heckle me or just looking for a warm place. Vegetation is not what Grand Canyon is known for. It's not the reason people come to see the park. These people out at Matter Point are not there asking, hey, where's the best place to see a well-developed blackbrush community. They're here for a number of other things they want to see. Sunset most appropriate, most likely. They're not alone. The veg mapping crews that we set out, for 2 years we had, I think, 8 crew members in the field for about 110 days each, sampling the vegetation. When they weren't sampling vegetation, every once in a while they'd take pictures of things that interested them in the field, and it was almost never vegetation. I'd get pictures like this. I mean, the park has got these world-class archaeological resources. Some of them actually look like plants, but I don't think that was the point they were trying to make. They're just fascinated by things other than vegetation. Or geology. I mean, this is like, this place is basically an open textbook of geology. It's not very often you get to walk around and see 800 million year old rocks or 1600 million year old rocks. In cases where they actually were taking pictures of geology but somehow found vegetation in the same place. I don't think they were trying to tell me about how different the south-facing slope and the north-facing slope next to Excalibur really was. I think they were trying to tell me something very different with this. In fact, this is a map of the geology of the eastern half of the canyon. This is the best-selling map in the history of Grand Canyon. It's not because, it's not because there are that many geologists in the world. I think it's because it's just an amazing display of geology that we have here in the park. I'm somewhat jealous. I'm hoping that the vegetation map has a similar future, but I don't think that will happen. So as I said, it's easy to get distracted by many other resources that we have in Grand Canyon when you're looking at the vegetation. There is vegetation here. Tonight I'm going to be talking about just the vegetation mapping project. I should tell you right now that we're halfway through a 5-year project. I don't have a map to show you yet, but we do have a lot of interesting data. And this is what I'm going to be talking about tonight. First off, why map vegetation? Why is it that Grand Canyon has hired me, the National Veg Mapping Program has put so much resource into this mapping effort? Second, a little bit of history. There have been vegetation maps in the past. I want to talk a little bit about them and how ours is going to be slightly different. I want to talk about how we've gone about sampling, what it is we've measured, what it is the crews have come back with, where we've gone, how we analyze the data, how we go from just plot data to a vegetation classification, and then from that classification and imagery and lots of other information about the geographic distribution of vegetation to actually create the map. And then I want to take you to some of the places that the veg crews have visited. There are some pretty interesting spots they've ended up in. So this is where we're going tonight. By the end of the talk, I hope that you get the feeling that vegetation is in fact an interesting and worthwhile resource, something you should pay a little bit of attention to the next time you visit the park. Okay, so why do we map vegetation? Well, first off, the practical answer is that it's required by law. The NPS Inventory and Monitoring Program, I think it was 94 or 96, decided that every park should have a vegetation-based map to use for management, to use as a baseline for measuring change through time. Since then, they've scaled it back to where there's only going to be 270 NPS units will have vegetation maps, but still, that's a majority of the land areas represented here. They specified standards. The Federal Geographic Data Commission has several requirements for the work that's going to be done, the work that goes into creating these maps. First off, you have the National Map Accuracy Standards, basically horizontal accuracy and standards. There's a National Vegetation Classification Standard. This is what NatureServe works with for us. There's ways you have to collect data, ways that you have to think about organizing the vegetation data before you actually start creating it. It's a process specification rather than specifying exactly what your veg classes will look like. You have to create metadata. There's a specific taxonomy that's specified. That is, you have to go to a specific source to determine what the names of these plants are. There are accuracy assessment requirements that are in the process of being changed, of course. The NVC is also being changed. We're actually populating the new NVC as we go along. And they specify a minimum mapping unit of 1/2 hectare, which is just about an acre. That's the smallest mapping unit that will be allowed on a map. So anyways, this is what's required by Congress. Another reason to map, this is just a map of the NPS mapping program, status in 2005. A number of parks have finished up. I think Glacier just finished up. Zion isn't on here, but it finished up. But there are a lot of parks here. It's everything from a couple hundred acres at Manzanar